With the first pick in the 2017 NBA Draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Markelle Fultz from the University of Washington.
More of the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Fultz Mania, baby. Officially a Philadelphia 76er. Right now we're going to head out to the hotline the day after the draft and get a full draft recap with Mitch Lawrence, NBA writer for Forbes. We'll talk a little Sixers. We'll talk some Knicks and go around the league as well. Always great to talk to Mitch Lawrence, who's kind enough to join us right now from Forbes. Mitch, appreciate the time. Thanks for it, and how are you?
Doing great. How you doing, Zach?
Well, I'm doing great. I'm a little bit tired from last night because I was at the Sixers practice facility very late last night, but it was well worth it to see how that did unfold for the Philadelphia 76ers. Your take on Markelle Fultz?
Well, I'll tell you what. I think Brian Colangelo and his guys did a tremendous job. They identified Markelle Fultz as a future go-to player, a guy you can get the ball to late in games and score with, and that's a big difference from Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge looked at Markelle Fultz and didn't see that player, so that's going to be fascinating to see how it works out. But a lot of people think that Markelle Fultz has the goods to be that type of player who can close games for you. And if he is, then Philadelphia got a hell of a pick. So I like that. I like their aggressiveness in the market. I love the fact that they gave up some assets to go get them. I know that's hard to do for some teams, but this is why you collect the assets to go get players like a Markelle Fultz. So I think Philadelphia, as long as, it goes back to the age-old thing, as long as people can stay healthy, especially the Embiids of the world, they've got themselves a nice little team there that can make some noise down the line.
I like the kid's personality. I know we ultimately judge him for what he does on the basketball court, but the underdog mentality with his background definitely plays in it. We're trying to find some negatives. Some people consider the 9 wins a negative at Washington. His free throws could improve in his defensive play. What are the things that, when you look at him translating to the NBA, that he has to do to be successful?
Well, I've talked to scouts. I don't judge them just on myself. I talk to people who've been around the game, who know the game. There are questions about his athleticism and quickness that some scouts don't like. They're down on that, so we'll have to see about that. But, defensively, look, who comes in the league is a good defender anyway. Most of these guys just concentrate on one end of the court, and I'm sure he's got a good work ethic. That's what you hear, and he'll address those things. He'll improve. But right now what you get is a guy who should be able to score all over the court, play 2 positions for you if need be, so that's a plus, and could be a real big-time scorer, and that's what you want to have. I mean, it's amazing that Danny Ainge, who needs scoring in Boston, did not go with a Markelle Fultz, but you know what? He also gambled that Jason Tatum's going to be better than Josh Jackson, so that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I just love the fact that these two teams are in the same division, so Markelle Fultz is going to be seeing Boston a lot and vice versa.
Were you surprised with them being in the same division, how little he got back in return, in my opinion, to make that trade?
What do you want him to get off of Philly, Joel Embiid?
No, but
I mean, he got him.
But the protections are robbery.
He might get a Sacramento pick out of it.
Yeah, but what happens if the Lakers fall maybe at 5? That's not a great deal. I don't think it's a great deal for him, no? You think it's a good deal for him?
Oh, I think it was a good deal, yeah, because he's going to parlay the asset into – he might turn around and use those assets to go get Paul George.
How likely do you think that is?
You know what? It's supposed to be a combination between – it could be a Paul George, Gordon, Hayward combination going to Boston. Don't be surprised if that happens. That's what I write about in Forbes. That's the buzz in the league. I think Danny Ainge did fine. He's got himself, I think, over the next 2 years, 3 picks that could be in the top 5. So I think Danny Ainge did fine with Markelle Fultz.
Yeah, I'm not killing him, but I just thought that he could have just got a little bit more for it. Mitch Lawrence joins us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. Let's get back to the Sixers. Now they're going to probably try to bring in a veteran shooter because they do need help from beyond 3 still with the core that they have right now. J.J. Redick is the big name, the sexy name that everyone's talking about. With Redick, what do you think the market will be like for him?
I think, it should be pretty good. I know the Knicks have looked at him. I think they're talking about him. Other teams, I mean, people know what he can do. I don't know what the situation is with the Clippers in terms of they're just going to let him walk, what they're going to do with him. Jerry West now is going to have a big say in matters out there. We'll see how he weighs in on things, and we'll see what Doc Rivers decides. But, we'll see. The big question is, do players want to go play in Philly? I just tweeted out something as I was coming on the show. Now that the Timberwolves have Jimmy Butler on board, they have raised their kind of expectations. They're now going to make a big move for a big-time point guard because now they think they'll be able to move Rubio and get a Kyle Lowry or a guy like a Drew Holiday, whereas before without a Jimmy Butler, they didn't know if they could. I don't know if people still are looking at Philadelphia or how they're looking at Philadelphia now because this team has never played together and guys have a history of injury, whether somebody's going to want to go play there.
And you look at the Eastern Conference, how many teams do you think are better than the Sixers? It's like 6 or 7, right? That's their range right now. I'd have to say if they could stay healthy, they could probably try to fight if they're healthy for a 7 or 8 seed this year.
Yeah, well, you got to remember, too, Indiana and Chicago are going to be rebuilding.
Yep.
And those were, 7th and 8th place last year? So those spots open. You don't know what Stan Van Gundy is going to do in Detroit. It seems like he wants to trade Reggie Jackson and Andre Drummond. He might lose Contavious, Caldwell Pope, whatever. The deal is that, yes, if everybody is healthy, the big question about Joel Embiid is these guys usually don't get better. They get worse when you have these type of injuries. So, yeah, on paper, that's one thing. We'll see what they do on the court, but obviously you got Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz and Joel Embiid. Yeah, if they're able to stay on the court and stay healthy, they should compete for a playoff spot.
Talking to Mitch Lawrence from Forbes right now on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920, the Jersey. All right, one more on the Sixers, and then we'll get into the clown show that is the New York Knicks. With Brett Brown, and he's been someone that's been a soldier here and has had to take a lot of hits and do a lot of press conferences when the old GM, and Sam Hinkie wasn't talking to the media. With that being said, though, Sam Hinkie required a lot of patience, and ultimately that ran thin here in Philadelphia, but he put a lot of assets together to get this team in that spot, and then that Colangelo completed it by making the trade and pulling the trigger on that. Just how about that relationship after all these years? How do you view Sam Hinkie, and what are people saying around the league about him potentially returning to a front office soon?
Well, I don't know about that. I think people understand that he did a very good job accumulating assets, but you don't raise up the Lowry O'Brien trophy by collecting more number one picks than anybody else. At some point, you have to make picks, like Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge has all these great assets. Some play, he has to spin those into some gold. He has to get some big-time players. And so I think the good thing for Philadelphia is Sam Hinkie wasn't around to make the picks on the players, because I don't think he's known as being a good talent evaluator in terms of how we're going to use these guys use these picks to go forward. I think people feel like Brian Colangelo is much better at that. And that, the type of move that he made with Markelle Fultz is something that was probably beyond Sam Hinkie.
All right, let's get to the Knicks. We know Phil Jackson can't communicate with anyone these days, and he treats Carmelo Anthony terribly, and now he's having problems with Kristaps Porzingis. Hey, I get it. Porzingis should have went to the exit interview, but Phil never helps himself. How about the Knicks right now? They're a clown show, Mitch.
Well, they are, but, Phil's still in power. So,
the guy why he's in power? It's because he's being the shield for James Dolan. That's what it is.
Okay. Well, what are they going to do about it?
Nothing. They're going to let this
ride
out.
We've been talking for
2 years, and then they're going to be a disaster again.
It's old news. Jim Dolan, it's frustrating for Knicks fans that he's the owner of the team. They're stuck with him. So what are you going to do? And he'll have Phil serve out the last 2 years. We'll see what kind of assets he accumulates. And then he'll have to go out and hire another GM. And we'll see who he picks at that point. Nobody has a lot of faith that Jim Dolan's going to make the right decision. That's the way it's been in New York for a long time. The only time he made some good choices was when the league, forced him to hire Donnie Walsh back in the day after the Isaiah Thomas sexual harassment lawsuit and all that stuff. So, no, things aren't any good. And Phil, what he's proven is that he's not cut out to do this job. He came in with 11 rings. They were all because of coaching. His teams were built for him. He did a tremendous job coaching the elite players of the world. But in terms of his how he's handled himself with Carmelo Anthony and now Porzingis, it's very problematic. And, I don't know, going forward, it's for Knicks fans, it's driving people up the wall, as you know, because they haven't had a lot of success. Even with Carmelo Anthony here, they haven't made the playoffs in, 4 years. And it's funny. Porzingis wants to leave, and people want him to stay, and Carmelo Anthony wants to stay, and people want him to leave.
It definitely is funny on that. And I don't know if Melo's going to be going anywhere because he may be trying to stick it to Phil, no?
Oh, no. It's beyond that. Carmelo Anthony forced his way to New York in 2011. This is where he wants to be. The losing doesn't bother him. It doesn't drive him crazy that he's not winning. He loves to be the king of New York. and he has the power that Phil gave him in the form of the no-trade clause, and so he's using that. He's wielding that to his advantage, and he is in no rush to leave New York because he loves being here, and that's what people have to remember. And they also have to remember that he's not wired like a lot of other superstars. If you want to call him a superstar, he's not driven to win. It doesn't kill him to lose.
How do they restore this relationship with Porzingis?
Well, Phil and Porzingis are going to have to sit down at some point, and probably the brother Giannis, who's one of his reps. I know they've sat down with his agent too, Andy Miller, but I guess that's what they're going to have to do, address it somehow. I think Porzingis will be fine when he comes, when he has to start playing again and back with the team starting in training camp. He should be okay. I think the big concern is, can he stay healthy? But in terms of just being on board with the team, as soon as he comes back, I'm sure Phil will have to sit down with him and explain to him what's going on. And Porzingis at that point should air out any problems that he has and not avoid Phil and basically be up front and say, this is what I don't like about the way things are handled here. And Phil will probably it won't even register with Phil because Phil's in charge, and it's beneath Phil to talk to people like that. But at least he could get that on the record, Porzingis.
What did you make out of the MSG interview the other night?
Well, the interesting thing was, when Phil talked about Porzingis, but also that fact that he basically said Carmelo basically told him he's good here to stay. And so that, it's just, it's a bad scene. Phil doesn't handle himself well, and hopefully, look, the bottom line for fans is hopefully the kid from France works out. It's interesting, Phil's approach to the draft now. He doesn't want to take guys who are from AAU ball who are playing in American colleges because he feels like it's too much of the hero ball and it's all about the player. It's not about the system. So he's going over to overseas to get these kids who can play in his triangle. So that could be a problem too because it's not exactly 2017 NBA basketball. I guess it's a bonus when anytime Phil sits down for an interview, you look at it two ways. It's a bonus that he's talking, but then when he talks, you kind of cringe about half the stuff he says.
It's funny you say that because the other day when we were talking about the interview on MSG, we all know Dolan and Jackson, they don't do a lot of interviews, but you're dead on. Whenever they do speak, they never help themselves as we're talking to Mitch Lawrence. Yeah, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, when Phil needs to do an interview is when Derrick Rose goes AWOL.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and he did it.
He shows up and he says stuff at the wrong time. And but see, here's the thing you have to know about Phil. Phil doesn't he's not going to nobody's going to tell Phil what to do. Phil is going to operate the way he wants to operate, not the way not the way a Pat Riley is going to operate in terms of how he deals with the media. Phil looks in disdain with the media for the large part. He has his favorites, we all know that, but for the most part, it's beneath him to talk to people.
Wrapping up with Mitch Lawrence, who joins us right now from Forbes. Okay, explain to me this Butler trade that happened last night.
Well, Chicago's rebuilding. And, when you trade a guy like Jimmy Butler, we've seen it for years and years and years, you're not going to get 100 cents in the dollar. So the guy they really think, Chicago, from their standpoint, they really think is going to be a big-time player, Zach LaVine, who's a two-time dunk champion who started to have a breakout year last year, and then he blew out his knee. So Chicago's excited about that. People feel they got fleeced, but you know what? I've been hearing that for years. No matter who gets traded, you'll always hear that the team that gets the Jimmy Butler wins out big. And we'll have to see. I mean, Chicago's got a lot of rebuilding to do. The problem is Dwayne Wade's going to be back for one more year. Rondo will probably be back. Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't believe in buyouts. If you're working for him, you're not going to get bought out. You're going to work for him. You're going to play. So Chicago is on this long road now where Paxson and Foreman, their front office, who've come under a lot of heat here, driving Thibodeau out, and et cetera, although they did draft Jimmy Butler. Give them credit for that. They're the guys who are going to have to make sense of this and somehow rebuild around Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and guys like that. And from Minnesota's standpoint, they hit a home run because they got Jimmy Butler. He's in his prime. He's a Thibodeau guy. He's going to tell Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins what needs to be done. As I just tweeted out, they now feel like they've elevated their team to the point where they can get a top-line free agent like a Kyle Lowry, who they're looking at first. Then they're going to look at Drew Holiday. They're going to look at George Hill. They're going to look at Jeff Teague, guys like that. So Minnesota, the mandate's been given by the ownership. Tom is now expected to win. Yesterday was a big part of that.
Other draft impressions, what were your other biggest takeaways from last night?
Well, I wasn't surprised by any of the first two picks. I thought the very intriguing pick was Boston taking Tatum at 3 because everybody was basically saying you have to take Josh Jackson. He's the best athlete. Danny Ainge did the right thing. He needs scoring. When you look at Boston, they're undersized, but they also have a problem scoring. They got a lot of similar wing-type players, but this Tatum kid, a lot of people think is great. I thought Sacramento, for the first time in 100 years, had a great night with the draft. I saw Dave Yeager, the coach at the lottery. He loved Fox at that time. He felt there was no way he would ever get Fox to fall to him at 5, although they're a little, suspicious of his shooting ability. They feel like they really hit a home run, Sacramento, and good for them. And, you look at the Knicks in the point guard, and did they make a mistake not taking Dennis Smith? Well, it goes back to what Phil Jackson doesn't want. He doesn't want a ball player who's all about himself and not the system. That's the way he looked at Dennis Smith, so he took the French kid. And otherwise, in terms of the other parts of the draft, I want to see how Malik Monk does for Michael Jordan. He's an undersized 2. He might have trouble getting a shot in the pros, but it's always intriguing to see Michael Jordan take someone who once scored 42 points against his Tar Heels.
Now, I'll tell you one more thing, just since you brought back up the Knicks, and we know how loyal the Knicks fan is, but it's amazing, after all what that franchise has been, that they still are in top 10 in attendance, Mitch. I just don't get it anymore.
Well, you know the area here. There are a trillion people, and they all want to go to the Garden because it's an event. The game is not. See, you have to. It's the marketing genius of Dolan and his people is that you go to the Garden because what celebrities did you see? What did you eat? What kind of drinks did you have? How was the Garden? What was the atmosphere like? Oh, by the way, did the Knicks win or lose? That's like 5th or 6th. It's not about winning. It's about the game is an event. And as long as they're doing that and people buy into that, that's great. People talk about you got to boycott the Knicks. You know how many people still would be online if everybody boycotted the Knicks? The place would still be sold out.
The corporate crowd, no question about that. Hey, Mitch, before we let you run, let's just get to this Cavs situation. How do you interpret it, and is LeBron going to be leaving soon?
I think LeBron's going to be leaving after this coming season. I think it'll be his last year in Cleveland. I think he feels like his legacy in Cleveland is set. He delivered on his promise to get them a championship, and now he's going to look for his post-NBA career. He wants to resettle, I think, in L.A. He's got a place out there. The word is his wife wants to live there full-time. His 2 boys are already in a school. He's got his mansion. We all know that. And I think that he's probably looking at, using it as a base of operations. Okay, after I'm done playing with the Lakers or the Clippers, because Chris Paul obviously is his friend, don't rule that out. What am I going to do? Am I going to go into Hollywood? Am I going to be a part owner with Steve Ballmer? Am I going to be aligned with Jeannie Buss and the rest of her family? Who knows? But I don't think he'll be staying in Cleveland beyond this year. I would be surprised. I just think that's the way he's looking. He's always looking to move out. And here's a guy. When people say to me, "Well, he can't leave Cleveland," he's already moved twice in his career. He's already left Cleveland once. What do you think that's going to prevent him?
And we all know the relationship with the owner. It's a contentious one. You even saw it last year. They did not embrace once when they won the championship and put their differences aside. Why didn't the owner go to him before they made the move on the GM? Like, how stupid can he be?
Because the owner feels like he owns the team, and LeBron James is an employee.
You got to go to LeBron, though.
Well, you know what? That's not the way Dan Gilbert thinks about things. Dan Gilbert is different than you and I, and Dan Gilbert probably thinks he knows more about things than LeBron. So, what makes sense to you and I about how you deal with LeBron and what you want. Dan Gilbert operates differently. He's totally different on that stuff, and you know what? It's amazing that LeBron cut him the biggest break ever. Dan Gilbert, I've been saying that ever since LeBron went back to Cleveland. He's the luckiest SOB alive because nobody else would have gone back there except LeBron forgave him.
Mitch, great stuff. What do you got coming up later for Forbes?
I'm going to take a look at the point guards coming into free agency because we got to figure out what Chris Paul's going to do. We know Steph Curry's going to be still there, but obviously Lowry and all these guys I mentioned, George Hill and Jeff Teague and Darren Williams. It's a point guard league, right? Philly's got one now. They don't have to worry about that.
They got a few because Ben Simmons is playing a lot of point as well.
That's right.
Mitch, great stuff. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Zach. See ya.
All right, let me ask you a question, Adam. Am I crazy on this Danny Ainge stuff?
Not really, honestly, but...
When I mean that I think he could have got more, it's when it comes to the protections.
Yeah.
I don't think he set himself up that greatly.
The thing is, though...
Because the Lakers, you got to think they're going to be in 2 through 5.
Right, but the thing is, it doesn't...
And if it's 1, you don't even get the number 1 pick.
I think his thought is that it doesn't really matter because whoever they were gonna pick at number 1, that they probably were gonna pick Tatum, and they figured he was gonna be there.
Yeah, they weren't going Fultz.
Right. So why not trade back, even if you're getting something minuscule, still getting another asset?
I texted Danny Ainge, by the way. Tried to get him on the show today.
Didn't happen.
Didn't hear back from him.
Didn't happen. But you know what I'm saying?
But here's the thing. That's a division rival.
Yeah.
When we first heard the speculation from Adrian Wojnarowski that Fultz is in play for the Sixers and a trade could happen, we thought they'd be giving up more.
I completely agree.
And they didn't.
Completely agree.
So I don't think that Danny Ainge lost the trade, but he didn't win it.
No,
He could potentially win it. Tatum turns into the star. And then let's say if they get lucky, the Sixers get the 1 pick from the Lakers next year, or the 6 and that Kings pick ends up being number 1 overall. And who knows? I trust Danny Ainge. He's a guy that's one of the most respected people in the league. Maybe he gets Paul George. Maybe he gets Gordon Hayward. But for a division rival, and I know he was being funny with the Embiid stuff, but you got to give up more. And they're not giving up Embiid. We all know that. They're not giving him up. But you got to get more, I would think. I was very surprised when I found out, because you heard the rumors over that weekend.
Right.
Okay, maybe it's both those picks that they're giving away. And then you found out the protections, if the lottery balls go their way, they could, and I know this is a pipe dream, they could get the 1 pick from the Lakers and the 1 pick from the Kings for the Sixers. I was just surprised about the protections.
It's true. I just think honestly it doesn't matter, because they got who they wanted, and why not move back 2 spots and just pick something else up?
But you know what I thought was going to happen? I thought this is what was going to happen. They would trade the picks 1 and 3. Then let's say they would give up the Lakers pick unprotected. Then I thought that the Kings pick would have a protection, like a 1 through 3 protection.
Sure.
That's what I thought would happen. The protections to me are just a little funky.